Hello and welcome to Dixon Cox. We are back. The Dicks and the Cox are back in the game. And we are back unsheathed, unzipped, unhinged. You decide. I went full party. I mean, unhinged, maybe. And we're back. We've been away for a
Unsheathed.
while. I was ill, then I was on holiday, then I was ill. So it's pretty much my fault. And we are back today on a Tuesday because Paul has last
The
minute changed it.
classic Dixon cycle.
Classic
by the
Dixon
way.
cycle. But we're back, Paul. And Paul, you wanted to move it from Wednesday to Tuesday, having requested Wednesdays, which just means I'm slightly less prepared. And no, I was sort of waiting for some news to happen. But what we're going to talk about is the 7/7 anniversary and the horrendous tweets, the Macron deal with Starmer, and if it's going to actually happen about migrants. James McMurdo has quit Reform and decided to stay as an independent. That is pretty big news for our kind of fans, I imagine. And then we might run through some of the stories we missed while I was away, like the Labour benefits bill, Rachel Reeves crying, Corbyn's new party, the Bob Villain thing. We might run through those perhaps in the paywall section on nickdixon.net. And you can get all my stuff for a mere £5 English. You get all my back interviews with people like Carl Benjamin, Lord Frost, Ben Habib, Charlie Downs, to name just a few. You get the full version of this podcast with Mr. Paul Cox and the extra bonus podcast we do that people love. It's like a cult following. And that's about non-political topics and is largely about my health problems. But for some reason, people love it. Paul, how are you doing?
I'm okay. Another day on planet Earth. The news doesn't stop coming, does it? Can you imagine if there was a day where there was nothing?
No news today, folks. So that's it.
Just we'll pack up, we'll stand up and walk away. That'll do you.
Yeah, I mean, the news is bollocks. If we lived in small villages like we used to, there would be no news anyway, would it? The news would be like, Daisy the cow is sick.
We had this discussion as part of our Go Mental episode last week that, we're not supposed to understand what's going on in the Congo or what's going on even in France. We're
supposed to know about the Congo is it's where they drink on bongo.
Exactly. That's the
the
national drink. And I think the anthem.
Yeah, they stand for the Umbongo drink anthem.
Umbongo. you got to do the accent, Nick. There's no other way. Yes. People wouldn't understand what we were talking about otherwise.
Is that racist? You decide. And don't write in. But yeah, that's a kind of old. The Zoomers won't get that, Paul. They'll be having to. I wonder if you can still get on Bongo and some website.
They might be able to. You might be able to look at it on YouTube. It's probably censored.
Oh yeah, I sometimes go back and watch those old theme tunes.
The 90s were wild, guys.
Really lonely.
It's why we are the way we are, by the way, because there was a level of freedom back then that Zoomers don't enjoy.
We're from a different era. You'll never understand, kids. We sound so old. Do you want to go into it then, Paul? You'll have all the people going, podcast starts at 3 minutes. No, it started at the start. You fucking dicks.
This is the podcast.
I'm already swearing. So sorry. And insulting the audience. Classic, Nick. Okay. Well, let's have a look at these 7/7 responses. Obviously, a horrific attack. In fact, I remember the attack. I remember where I was, and I was talking to a Greek guy, a very smart guy. He was a good guy. I liked him, but...
Good guy.
I have to say that because I'm about to diss him. I remember thinking, well, my brother's in London, and I remember it being like, he would have been reasonably close to these attacks, and we were sort of worried about it. And so, and that makes you uneasy. And I said that to him, and he made some weird point, this Greek guy, about like, well, that should be expected, though. We should expect terrorist attacks all the time. It was like a kind of Sadiq Khan-esque point. I don't know if it was some leftist point about, well, we intervene in other countries, so we should expect it. He was making some weird point about we should expect this kind of thing all the time. And I was thinking, even if you have that weird idea, maybe don't say it when I've just said that I was worried about my brother. Maybe some thoughts can stay in your head. So that always stays with me because it was a very frightening moment. And obviously we lived through 9/11 as perhaps the defining moment of our generation as well. And then we had 7/7. It just felt like there was going to be so much of this stuff at one point. And I remember I used to work in a bookshop in Central London. People wouldn't come in on 7/7. They wouldn't risk, even though it doesn't quite make logical sense, they wouldn't want to come in.
Christmas Day, is it? You don't just celebrate it every year. Oh, it's 7/7 Eve. Make sure you got your nails in the bomb. Yeah, that's not happening. I don't know why I made it sound like it was a jolly thing.
No, but
they aren't repeating it. And It's another part of this Greek guy, by the way. It's another part of the race to the bottom. Just because, right, this is going to sound pretty xenophobic, I'm sure, but just because other places are
Perfect.
hellholes doesn't mean that we should also be a hellhole. It should be acceptable to strive not to be a terrorist-ridden hellhole. And our capital city should be somewhere to go that we haven't constantly got to look over our shoulder. And I cannot remember a time I've been in and out of our national capital city really since about 2008, 2009 to now, so 15, 16, 17 years or whatever. So in 2005, when this happened, I was in occasionally, very rarely. And I didn't know too many people up there. So it seemed like back then it did seem like something that happened in London. And it reminded me of the days like when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s when the IRA were prevalent. At least they had the decency to ring forward and let us know where it was.
Yeah. Honourable terrorism.
Queensbury rules of terrorism.
Queensbury rules terrorism. Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me, sir. I'd like to report a bomb.
Yes.
If you're Irish, why are you speaking like that? It's the Queensbury rules terrorists. Yeah.
Exactly. So I get it. Oh, you've done all this and you've done all that, but the idea is that we're trying to protect ourselves from it. But hey, look. Our capital city represents the world, doesn't it? And the world's a mess. So what are we to expect?
Yeah. Well, let's look at some of these posts. So Keir Starmer said, 20 years on from the 7/7 attacks, we remember all those whose lives were lost and those whose lives were changed forever. We honour the bravery of the first responders and the strength of the survivors. Those who try to divide us will always fail. So many people objected to the phrase lives were lost. And I also found the very strange phrase, those who try to divide us will always fail. It's like, why are you making this into a message about multiculturalism? What's that got to do with anything? You can't help yourself. The full statement went, those who tried to divide us failed. We stood together then and we stand together now against hate and for the values that define us of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. This ubiquitous and somewhat nebulous hate they keep all mentioning. You'll see that as these tweets go on. The old metaphysical enemy of hate. So I said that this was disgusting. Classic Nick. I said unbelievably disgusting, not just the framing of lives lost as if 7/7 was a natural disaster, but the repellent need to say we haven't been divided, etc. Multiculturalism is our elite's religion. And the worse things get, the louder they repeat their desperate devotions. I was quite pleased with that phrasing because
Poetic.
I was thinking of like Catholics doing their devotions, but obviously I respect Catholicism and I don't respect the doctrine of multiculturalism because I was thinking this, and I talk about this with Laurie Wastel on a forthcoming podcast, where it's almost like the elites are worshipping themselves. They've got this multicultural society, which is an absolute shit show, which they've created. Instead of saying, sorry, we better unwind that, guys, they go, do you know what? Diversity is our strength, and we're standing against hate, and people who divide us will fail. So the more, and now they have sort of hate speech laws, which, Laurie was calling blasphemy codes. The more it's an inverse relationship, Paul. The worse things get, the more they advance their multiculturalism, the more they repeat these devotions, not the less. You see, so and you'll see this when the King's statement as well. The more horrific things get, they say, "Well, this just proves our need to be standing together against hate." No, it doesn't. It proves that multiculturalism's failed. What do you think?
Yeah, disappointed slightly in the King's statement as well. We expect it from Keir Starmer. And to be fair, and I am a royalist, we do expect it from this king as well. We wouldn't have seen, I don't think, the same engagement with multiculturalism in the same way, pious way is the way I see it, from late departed Queen Elizabeth II. Look,
should we read it out just so people know?
Yeah, go on now, read it out because now we've mentioned it. Yeah.
King Charles says, today as we mark 20 years since the tragic events of 7th July 2005, my heartfelt thoughts and special prayers remain with all those whose lives were forever changed on that terrible summer's day. While the horrors will never be forgotten, we may take comfort from the way such events rally communities together in solidarity, red flag there, solace and determination. It is this spirit of unity that has helped London and our nation to heal. As we remember those we lost, let us therefore use this 20th anniversary to reaffirm our commitment to building a society where people of all faiths and backgrounds can live together with mutual respect and understanding, always standing firm against those who would seek to divide us. So there again, you've got reaffirming multiculturalism. You've got this thing about dividing us. And I said I hate to criticize the king, and people have said, why do you hate it? Well, because I respect the institution. and I respect the idea of monarchy. I hate to criticize the king, but this is an appalling statement. Multiculturalism is always the unimpeachable God. Every horror merely amplifies the need to reaffirm this. It is this deranged cult which has captured almost all of our leaders that is destroying the West. Paul.
I'm glad we read out your intellectual tweets and not my tweets, because
I only read out my own tweets because I put it better than I'm going to say it now, and then I just riff off the back of it.
They're great. Look, I am disappointed that it's almost like there's one homogenous group that sits at the top of power that wants to make sure the messages are always the same. I don't know. Describe it as you will. The Illuminati, the Blob, the WEF, whatever it is, conspiratorial speaking. There is something there that makes sure that everybody is thinking the same way. Hammer home the message. And by the way, there's a couple of things that stand out. So we won't let them divide us and win. They have divided us, and they are winning. There's no two ways about it. But we're 20 years on from them. It's shitloads worse. It's shitloads worse than it was in 2005. For sure. Anybody who was around in 2005, and by the way, there are some 20-year-olds that may even be listening to this that were just born then. It was all the beginning of the end had already started. For me, the beginning of the end started in 2001 when the two towers were hit and we had this New World Order business and the world was divided. But that's not what this show's about. However, people like Keir Starmer and God save him, our King Charles, they, in their mind's eye, or whoever's doing the writing for them, are preaching to an audience. And that preaching in itself, for me, is inherently racist, because what it says is we don't want to offend these people, and all multiculturalism peoples think the same way. So if we were to say that terrorism is part of importing danger onto our shores, then we would be attacking multiculturalism, and we can't do that because the multiculturalism horse has already bolted. So in order for them to point the problem out, they'd have to first of all admit it exists, which they rarely do, if at all, particularly anywhere on the left or within liberalism. They don't just, it's like alcoholism. The first step to getting better from alcoholism is admitting that you're an alcoholic. The first step to removing any chance of terrorism, imported terrorism into this country, is to admit where it comes from. And it comes from that multiculturalism drive. And it wasn't that multiculturalism wasn't a plan that they set out. They didn't go, sometime in the late 80s, early 90s, we have a plan for multiculturalism. The country's too white. We want to make it multicoloured in some way. That's not what happened. We've discussed this a million times. We had Blair and Brownite politics, which basically opened up our shores to bolster the bottom end of the community, economy, to try and grow our economy in order for us to become more prosperous again on the back of, the glory Thatcher years, etc., etc. It didn't work. And they suddenly realised as it was going on that flooding different cultures into every major city across the country, was going to cause a problem. And one thing you can do, particularly if you're liberal-minded, is convince those other sheep that this is a good idea. And if you can do it in a way that suggests that the people that don't think it's a good idea are bad in some way, all the better. All the better, because these people love the dichotomy between oppressed and oppressor. And that's exactly what we got here. And all Keir Starmer's written statement and the King's written statement do is just lean into that doctrine, that narrative once again, that's proving incredibly unhelpful. Now, they don't have to call out multiculturalism. What they could do, not multiculturalism for some of its inherent negatives, I should say. What they could do is not mention it at all. There was a time in history where we just didn't mention somebody's background or cultural difference. We were British. The idea, the British culture is something worth saving. I said this today. On the back, I requoted a tweet that you shared with regards to LBC. And it's as if we have decided collectively that British culture is bad and it's not worth saving. Who cares if someone's speaking another language, etc.? Well, the reason we should care is because if we went back 20 years, it didn't matter. It was interesting, like Ian said on LBC. It was mildly interesting to go to somewhere like London or Manchester or wherever and hear people speak different languages. Oh, I wonder what that was. Yes, that was a perfectly acceptable response to hearing a foreign language maybe 20 years ago. Now, it's part of a much more sinister idea. And that idea is that we shouldn't question that whatsoever. And why should the English language be important in Great Britain in any way, shape, or form? So we have a huge issue now. And the issue being is we've got this great blob of people who are in huge positions of power, like the king and the prime minister and media types, who can just freely say that multiculturalism is working. If you question it in any way, you're racist. And we've got to get back in the box. And then just merrily going about their business are the terrorists and bad people on the side, Nick. And it drives me mad because why would we not want to kill this cancer? Multiculturalism is a cancer. There's no two ways about it. It hasn't helped us or enriched us in any way since the days of when it was a manageable level. Now it's unmanageable, and it doesn't matter that numerically we are the prevailing culture in terms of white, British, etc., etc. The prevailing winds don't suggest that we are, because everybody in power preaches this multiculturalism bollocks. So it doesn't matter if you're part of the numerical majority. You are soon becoming the minority because those voices are squashed as dissenters, Nick.
Yeah, and you're a second-class citizen in the justice system, in job recruitment, and in so many other ways. Yes, and yeah, you're talking about the Ian Dale clip on LBC. He was talking to Andrew Gold, and Dale just sort of said, "Oh, if I hear languages, I just think, oh, what language is that?" Whereas Andrew was saying it's a bit weird that to have his neighborhood completely changed and have no recognizable languages. That is a massive change. You have to be completely mentally ill to think it's a good thing. Like, oh, yeah, do you know what? It's great if our people and language die out. One of the greatest people to have ever lived. Yeah, that's great. I mean, even if we weren't great, you'd be like, why do you want your own people to? I mean, I said being indifferent to, and in some cases we see even cheering on the destruction of your people and language is evil on an almost unfathomable scale. So I wasn't on the fence there. I think it's evil, but they just haven't recognized how evil and how insane it sounds because they think it's normal.
Cultural suicide, cultricide. I don't even know if that's a word, Nick. Let's call it. Let's coin that phrase here. We commit cultricide on a hourly basis now in this country, and most people are accepting of it. And the reason they are is because they've just learned that to question that in any way is going to cause them an embarrassment or a problem that they really don't want to take on. They've got enough problems as it is, and they don't want to fight that fight. Unfortunately, if we don't fight the fight, and this has got nothing to do, as far as I'm concerned, some people might disagree with me, nothing to do with colour of skin, even maybe religion. It's got everything to do with the inherent incumbent culture of the British Isles, which exists and has existed for a millennia. It's been growing for a millennia. I don't care where you came from. I mean, I do now because the numbers are ridiculous. And if you came on a boat and you're in Dover and we have no idea who you are, then I have a massive issue with it because it's causing safety issues for women and children and men across the country. However, it's got nothing to do necessarily with the skin colour and religion. That's how they divide you. If everybody, I've got friends, you've got friends, that English isn't their first language. Culturally, British isn't their first culture, but they have all assimilated in some way, or at least they are trying on a daily, weekly basis. And therefore, there is some enrichment in that because then they can share a little essence of their culture with us. And I have no issue whatsoever. But the respect is always there for the incumbent culture. There's a minute that you've got someone like Ian Dale going, well, so what? So what, Ian? What do you mean, so what? And I said that in my tweet. I said, I shall keep saying this until I get stabbed to death by one of the multicultural angels. Because that's eventually what's going to happen to all of us. We all just become a victim somehow of what's going on out there. And do you know what? If we don't fight it, and I know I sound vitriolic now, so what? If we don't fight it...
You just said, so what?
So what? I've fallen into the trap. But do you know what? If we don't fight it, we are going to end up in a whole world of pain, irreversible world of pain. And the fear for me right now is that it's already irreversible.
Yeah, that is a fear. A couple of things, Paul. So what? Yeah, that came from Sajid Javid. He said this a while ago. It's even more bizarre for me and Dale, especially, I think. But as for my friends, I only have one friend, Paul. He's called Paul. And if we count you, I have two friends called Paul. And they are... I
thought that was it.
So they don't have... English. The English is their first language. So just to counter, no, I don't have friends who.
Well-spoken English is my second language, as you know.
Just to counter what you said there, I'm not this citizen of everywhere like you. I'm not swanning around Davos. But and the skin thing, yeah, people want to reduce it to the skin color to try and call you racist. The skin color only matters in the English is a real ethnicity, which people are trying to claim it isn't, and we don't exist, and we happen to be white, as I've said before, because it's a rainy island with not much sun. So it's only important in that. English people happen to be white, and the Englishness is what's important. And when you talk about suicidal, it reminded me of Gad Saad's suicidal empathy. He has a good phrase for this, and that's exactly what it is. But well, that's part of what it is. But there's more going on with these tweets. And let me just read Yvette Cooper's. Today we remember the 52 who lost their lives, the loved ones they left behind, and all those injured and affected by the horrific 7/7 attack. So it's lost their lives again. We remember too the bravery of fellow passengers and emergency services, the determination of our country to stand together against hate. And there's hate again, the ubiquitous metaphysical quality that can never be eradicated. I say you may as well fight a war on embarrassment or nostalgia. You are not getting rid of hate. But the thing we're standing together against is Islamic terrorism. It's very, very simple. But she can't say it. Starmer can't say it. And our king can't say it.
Yeah.
And Sadiq Khan, of course, can't say it. He said London will always stand united against hate. Who can say it? Interestingly, Kemi Badenoch. And, I attack Kemi a lot, so let's give her praise when she deserves it. Although this is it should be a no-brainer, but it's not in our current climate, so we have to give her credit. The service at St. Paul's today was profoundly sorrowful. A painful reminder that Islamist terrorists, there it is, still seek to destroy our way of life. They hate our liberty and our tolerance, and their barbarism must never be allowed to change who we are. And I said, thank you for actually naming the problem. I mean, how hard was that to say? She's the only person I've seen that said it. And guess who else didn't say it? Was Mr. Farage. And I put out a fairly harsh tweet that I probably couldn't have put out while I was still working out at GB. I would have anyway, because that's what I'm like.
It never stopped you, Nick.
It's never stopped me in the past. But, I might have had, well, actually, probably nothing would have happened. But I used to diss reform all the time. Farage put out this video where he did say extremism, he did say things like this, but he didn't say Islam, Islamist, Islamic. He didn't say anything like that. He just said extremism, and he sort of danced around it in a weird way. And you have to wonder, with Zia Yusuf in there and with this new candidate they've been parading around, the sort of plausible-looking, stylish Muslim woman, Lila something. I said even Kemi said the word Islamist, but Farage can't, presumably because it goes against the policy of Submit UK. So when he said that thing about we will lose to Islam, I called them Submit UK based on thinking about Michelle Welbeck's book Submission, where an Islamic party takes over. So do you think it was interesting, Paul, that only Kemi managed to mention it?
I think it was a positive step for Kemi to mention it. There's a couple of things on that. I mean, the euphemistic language of terrorism is not just kept for Islamic terrorism. I mentioned the IRA earlier and Irish terrorism. We never called it that. We called it the Troubles, euphemistically, the Troubles. Like, there was a bit of a skirmish somewhere. It wasn't. It was very serious. It was very serious on both sides. So euphemistically, we've always kind of played it down just to kind of put this censor blanket, for the want of a better term, across the issue so that we don't quite offend anyone. One thing I would say, particularly from reform and trying to win over the Muslim vote, which does feel like a thing, is so what? Nobody is saying, really, unless we get to that point soon, that all Muslims are Islamic terrorists. That's the point of using the term Islamist or Islamic terrorism. So therefore, we should be able to have Muslims within a right-wing party that are against Islamist terrorism, and therefore we should be able to talk about it in non-euphemistic terms and call it out for what it is. Because if we don't, then it's always just going to stay over there, and we never deal with it. So I don't really understand why Nigel appears to be tiptoeing around issues like this. Now, if this has just happened once, I could possibly be saying to you now, come on, Nick, it seems a little bit unfair, etc. But this seems to happen each time there's an event like this. Nigel skirts the issue. Now he's playing a political game, and probably a very canny political game. I said this on Ben Leo Late Edition the other night. He's quite clearly trying to win over the red wall, so therefore he's appeasing to people that are unionist leaning. He's appealing to people within the working class cultural groups, which includes all sorts of people, including Muslims and all sorts of other religions. So I can see what he's trying to do, but it doesn't mean you can't call it out for what it is, because we just end up with this policy and politics that's not transparent, which we've just got with the blob. By the way, I mentioned culture. Culturicide is a word, by the way. It means cultural genocide. I looked it up as I was typing, so I haven't invented anything, once again, not original in any way. But I would like to see us just be honest. I talked about this again on the same program on Sunday night. People were talking about what can we do with this, and what about the economy, and what about the budget. Everybody who is making decisions, whatever party it is working within this very tight, narrow sort of space in which they can politically operate because they don't understand out of it. I was saying that, and therefore nobody is going to make a step change and do anything differently. We need a complete washover of everything that once happened and to think completely differently. I'm not seeing that from anybody, reform included. If they were to get in now, I still don't understand how they would repair the economy, because following Blairite or Brownite politics, which is what everybody has done since the mid-90s, every Conservative leader, every Lib Dem leader, every Labour leader has followed Brownite/Blairite economic policy. They have not changed a thing. Nobody has changed a thing. They've done it. And I think I said this the other night as well, that Rachel Reeves would have been considered a liberal kook had she been around in the Labour cabinet in the mid-90s. They would have been far to the right of Rachel Reeves. Now she's considered the mainstream standard bearer for Labour economics. And of course, there are some serious doubts on whether she's qualified to call herself an economist at all. So we're not going to do anything by repeating the same things. We need someone to come in, and hopefully that's within reform or within whatever it might be, and generate a completely new style of politics which just breaks everything down. It just has to. It just has to. Talking about... I was talking the other day about Theresa May talking about the Tories being the party, the nasty party, okay, because they made difficult decisions. When was the last time a difficult decision was made in politics? I genuinely can't remember the last. That hasn't been rowed back. I should hasten to add.
Yeah, Labour made it, and then immediately, and it wasn't even that difficult. It was a small saving on benefits that they immediately rowed back on. I just wanted to come back on one thing before we end this topic, which is Nigel Farage. So when people shout at me that I should vote reform, and I've noticed more and more people have turned against them, and I get less of the shouting, but I do get some of that. And I did vote reform, but now I'm completely put off them. One thing Farage will do, he'll never signal against Islam in any way. He's very, very careful. He's like, we've got Zia Yusuf, isn't that great? He says, if we in any way upset Islam, we will lose. And he overestimates the numbers. And then but one thing he's very happy doing is constantly signaling against the right. He'll say, Ties will say we don't want anything to do with that lot, meaning Toby Robinson supporters. Farage will constantly attack the right, and the alt-right he'll say, and he'll conflate things together. So here's my point: Trump wouldn't do that. See, Trump would be careful to not alienate his base on the right.
There's some good and bad people on both sides. That's exactly what he said.
And sometimes
Charlottesville.
You can sometimes say, well, Trump just plays lip service to it, and he doesn't actually support them, and especially over things like January 7th and so on. But he will never do that. So from that, you see where the party's priorities lie. Therefore, I say, reform may have many qualities, but they're just a left-wing party who are very keen to distance themselves from the right, but won't distance themselves from Islam, for example. So you say, okay, that's fine. That's their base then, and it doesn't include me. That's all. They go out of their way to do that. So that's my critique there.
And my critique is slightly more existential than that. I want to see a completely different type of politics. Completely different, because I can't think of a time... Yeah, not that you don't, Nick, sorry. I'm not on a charge on my own here, by any stretch of the imagination, within or without these walls. But I just want to see something different, completely different. Now, I'm not qualified enough to know whether Liz Truss, for instance, when she came up with her budget and economical plan, could have worked. But I was absolutely fascinated by it because of the ripples it created within the markets. As soon as I saw that, I didn't immediately think, oh, she's done for. I thought, oh, she's doing something different and I don't like it. That's good. So my reaction to it was, oh, they're trying to control us, which is exactly what they did. And look, I haven't looked at it enough. So there could be people in the comments going, you're miles off, Paul. It was the shittest thing that's ever been produced. But there was something about it that I found quite exciting. It was just different. And I want to see lots of different ideas, because nothing we've done for 30 years has improved. We've got this kind of dull equilibrium where we have decided to go as quickly as we possibly can to the bottom. We haven't quite reached there, but we're quite happy being as low down as possible. I don't want that. And you know what? If you were trying to change your own finances, your own business, your own situation, you would have to get a few cuts and bruises along the way. And I'm not afraid of that either. So what? That's what we have to do. If we have a clear vision and we strive towards it, and we have to break a few eggs to make that omelette, then so be it. At the moment, we're all just trying to please too many people at once. Basically, I would say to people, this is our vision. If you vote for it, you're on board or you're not. And we just go for it. Absolutely, full pelt, go for it, come what may, and see what happens, because what is happening is absolute bollocks.
Well, I certainly agree, and maybe something like Restore UK or Restore Britain, sorry, is going to be the new movement. Maybe that will help. And on this topic, let's continue on reform and talk about James McMurdo. So now I don't want to repeat anything libelous, because papers have got sort of a habit of printing things. Actually, if you say them in a broadcast, it's suddenly defamation, even though they printed them, or it can be contempt of court. Or I've run into these issues. So the Times printed this article claiming that James McMurdo had basically taken loans during the COVID era that wouldn't be warranted by the turnover of that business. So you wouldn't be allowed to take that amount of loan given the turnover of the business. And they're sort of implying, given that these businesses were quite new and didn't seem to have any that many employees, that it wouldn't be likely he would have the requisite turnover, and a couple of other things along those lines. So, and he responded saying that it was all false. He said, "I confirmed to the journalists that all my business dealings had always been conducted fully within the law and in compliance with all regulations, and that appropriately qualified professionals had reviewed all activity, confirming the same." And he says, "My business dealings have been reviewed by ICAEW qualified professionals. Absolute compliance was confirmed. My register of interest was completed with the support of IPSA." So that's another thing, is they're saying, well, he didn't register these as interests when he became an MP either. That's their claim, and he refutes it. So as a precautionary measure, and as for the protection of Reform UK, I've asked to have the whip suspended temporarily, and Lee Anderson released a statement to that effect. But the update is, as of a couple of hours ago, as we record on the 8th of July, James says, further to my statement tweeted on 5th of July 2025, I've now had a chance to take specialist legal advice from an expert in the relevant field. In light of that advice, which is privileged and which I choose to keep private at this time, I've decided to continue my parliamentary career as an independent MP, where I can focus 100% on the interests of my constituents. And that's interesting and unfortunate, because it's another of my favourite MPs. I mean, Rupert was my favourite, and James was probably my second favourite. He quite often likes my tweets, which is kind of the sole criterion, in fact, for me liking you. But so I like James. He's quite based on things like assisted dying and abortion, and he didn't seem to be as liberal as some of the others. And yes, he had that incident in the past with the assault when he was 19, and the party perhaps they were hoodwinked and had to defend him, but the defense was, look, he was 19, he's turned his life around and become exemplary. And I think that's actually a good defense in a Christian society that we're supposed to be. Farage was grilled about it by journalists, and what is their take? You just do something bad and that's it forever, even though criminals do much worse things than that and get out. Rapists and murderers get out. And so, but you think, and in some cases they shouldn't, in some cases there should be the death penalty, but someone assaults someone at 19 and doesn't get out, doesn't recover ever, even if they've repented inwardly and by their actions. I think that's not plausible. So you have to have some sort of rule. Anyway, so I was glad that they defended him on that. But even if the details are somewhat lurid when repeated by journalists, but it has to be standard. So, and he was doing well, so it's very sad. But Dan Wootton says James McMurdo quits Reform UK, knowing full well the party wanted him gone. Another patriot thrown to the gutter like Rupert Lowe was. If you can't see this is wrong, ... And one does wonder, is it just the Times are out to get him, or is he being briefed against? I'm not saying he is. Dan is saying that probably, but you do wonder, because the ones that Reform don't like, the ones that are too based, lo and behold, one of them is a 67-year-old man who's arrested and his gun seized because Zia Yusuf felt so under threat by this 67-year-old farmer who's never hurt anyone. And then another is suddenly, the story comes out. You sort of wonder, obviously, if he did the things, then you could say, so what, how it came out. But it's a bit suspicious. I don't know. I don't want to get too conspiratorial. But the Rupert Lowe one was obviously bollocks. This one, I don't know. But you do wonder. And then you look who's left in the party. Lee Anderson, former Tory. Sarah Poachin, former Tory. Richard Tice wanted to be a Tory. Farage, spiritual Tory. And you go, this is the Tory party. And meanwhile, the actual Tory party moves to the right of reform, with Kemi actually naming Islamic terrorism and a number of other things, and Jenrick saying some good things. So, anyway, what do you make of it, Paul?
Yeah, it is fascinating to me. I'm always kind of slightly surprised when they're quite happy to just let, they had 6 MPs max, and they're quite happy to let MPs go. You're like, it's diminishing returns here, guys. Well, you can't just keep letting them go.
You can. It'll just be Farage, won't it? I'm the last MP for reform. I'm going to be at the Home Office. I'm going to run education, and I'm going to run the Feds.
You can't have a majority of one, though. Can you imagine that? You've got one guy on one side of Parliament, and then 500 people on the other side. That's not how it works.
Farage is banking on cloning technology rapidly improving.
Yeah, maybe he is.
I clone myself. I'm going to do all jobs for 40 UK. When we get into government, there's 100 of me.
So, I mean, James McMurdo was an interesting character. He never looked... Rupert Lowe always looked like he fitted within the Reform Party for me, within the Parliamentary Reform Party, fitted amongst the likes of Farage, etc. But people like James McMurdo, maybe even Lee Anderson to some degree, didn't necessarily look to me as if they fitted within that sort of framework. But quite clearly Lee does. James... I don't know. I do know. I've met Lee actually, but I've never met James, so I don't know why I'm referring to them by his first name. But he won. He won his constituency. Hard fought. Well done. He will now go. I don't know what we're going to do with all these independent MPs, by the way, on the right of politics. I really don't know how they're going to come together as one collective and make a difference. And I'll be interested to understand, as we all would, by the way, what Nigel Farage's plan is for the Reform Party, because it seems to be build it and knock it down twice a month. And I don't quite understand quite where he's going with it. And he's doing it on a wave of populism, which is great. Of course, there's a wave of populism because they're the only alternative. Everyone else is roughly the same. The Tories aren't any different to Labour, really. You get Kemi Badenoch comes and says one good thing every now and again. And of the Lib Dems, the Tories are essentially the Lib Dems that didn't want to stay in the Lib Dem party because they're kind of crazy, and these ones are slightly less crazy. Farage is trying to become a Thatcherite Conservative party, as far as I can see. So he's trying to become a historic version of the Blob type party. So I don't know where we're going to get our shift change from. The only thing we do hear change on is immigration. And, I'm pleased to hear that, because we have to have controlled immigration in order to make Britain great again.
But, I don't really trust reform on immigration. But on this James McMurdo thing, why are you saying... just to put the devil's advocate, I don't know if this is true. If it is, or even if it isn't, McMurdo has removed the whip from himself. So is there an argument that, of course, if you believe that it's been secretly briefed against, it's very different. But if it's just happenstance, then it's not Farage's fault, much like when Zia Youssef left. So when you say, what Farage is doing with reform, are some of these things just out of his control? Or do they at least indicate that the party's not well run or something?
Removing the whip from himself was probably a good and proper move, and something that you would expect of maybe a decent MP in some way. That to me doesn't stand out, although, shoot me down if you think I'm wrong in the comments. However, once he's had a chance it's the 8th today, and he removed his own whip on the 5th, only 3 days. He's maybe looked back into his parliamentary party to have a look how much support he's got and thought, 0. So I'm going to have to leave this party because I can't rely on them. And if I'm working entirely independently at this moment, I'm going to have to work independently from here on in. So he's obviously, from my money, he's looked back in how that sort of lack of support is manifesting itself. I have no understanding of that. If they are briefing against one of 5 MPs within that party, so
they've done it before.
80%, but with him in there, it's 5. So if 80% of the party are briefing against 20% of the party, that is a huge issue. Particularly when we don't understand what the plan is. Because really, in theory, unless there's any more defections, which there could well be, of course, Probably not huge amounts. I don't know what's going to happen between now and 2029. It's not till 2029 that really they can do anything about it. They can carry on riding this wave of populism. They can carry on winning councils and local elections and govern from that low level to prove to the constituents that they can govern. And they're going to have to do that very well, even though it's incredibly difficult. They're going to have to do that very well in order to prove to those constituents that it can be done. There are some dyed-in-the-wall reformists that will never change their mind, but they don't need to change their minds. They have to try and change the minds, as is apparent Farage is trying to do, of the Lib Dem, Tory and Labour voters that sit perhaps within the red wall or working class areas of Great Britain. And the only way they're going to be able to do that is proving to them there's a change, because you can look at that and go, oh, we need to win them over based on these historic things that they like. But to me, that's a mistake. It's a clear mistake, because you only got to look at the support Rupert Lowe has got. Now, outside of our discussions and maybe discussions on the right, Rupert Lowe's not perhaps a big political figure. He's becoming more so, but he's still considered quite a small political figure. However, what you can see within his sphere of influence, that he's managed to garner a huge amount of support just by saying the things that he does, which is what we naturally believed the Reform Party stood for. And it appears they've completely gone against him in favour of Zia Youssef in some way. So to see this for James McMurdo, now he's no totem pole within the Reform Party. Sorry, James, if you're listening. For my money, you don't seem to be. And therefore, maybe this is not such a big casualty, as big a casualty as Rupert Lowe was. But it's endemic of what is going on within the Reform Party. And it just raises, for those of us looking at it, hoping for better things, it keeps raising more and more question marks, Nick.
Yeah, I agree. And you're right that the councils will be key, even though it's sort of the dull, low level of politics. We don't talk about them much, but it's so important. And whether they can save money on those councils, because the councils are always like, how are you going to save money? We tried and we can't. And my hope was always, well, there's probably all kinds of lefty assumptions baked into your spending, and they could definitely cut those. But who knows? There's people like Darren Grimes, actually, our former colleague, who on the ground having to do it. Let's see if they can do it. And Farage has openly said, ask me in a year, we'll be judged on that. And he's accepted that they will be. But of course, there's a lot to win there, because if they do well with the councils, then they do seem like a viable party of government. So that's we'll have to wait and see on that one. Should we
just one last? I just wondered what your opinion was on this collective of independent right-wing politicians now. That what are they going to do? I mean, we know what Ben Habib is doing. Excellent interview, by the way. But he's not a parliamentary.
No, he's not an MP. So,
but Rupert Lowe, we know that he's. We know roughly what he's doing. At the same time, he announced what he was doing, but that's not a new party. What are they all going to do?
Well, I think James will align more with Rupert, because I've noticed on Twitter they still have friendly back and forths, and which probably reform hate. So he'll probably align with Restore Britain. But as you say, that's a movement. And I just interviewed Charlie Downs yesterday. If you want to check that out, all about Restore Britain. He's the co-founder and spokesman. Restore Britain is key, but yes, it's not a party. So I suppose James will work with Rupert. I can see Rupert eventually joining the Tories. I've said this for a while, and he's met with Jenrick and so on. Whether James would, I'm not as sure. It's so new, and they might not want him. But certainly there are Tories that want Rupert Lowe. So I could see that happening. But yeah, it's an odd one, isn't it? Being an independent, Rupert thinks a movement's better than a party at the moment. But we do have these independents, don't we? I mean, maybe they'll be mopped up by the new Corbyn party, but we have the Islamist independents, the parties who believe in Palestine above all else. And you're like, I think you're in the wrong country, mate. They're quite effective at knocking out Labour. And we know that Jess Phillips and Wes Streeting almost lost to them. So maybe independents are the way forward. I think what we're going to have, Paul, is this time of turmoil, aren't we, where the main parties are falling apart. The Tories are on life support. Labour are going to be on life support, because they're falling apart. Starmer's capitulated to the left of the party. We now have the Jezbollah party with Jezza and Zara Sultana. You're going to see all kinds of fracturing. We've got Reform, which is a splinter, which is a populist uprising. But then we have that splintering into Restore and into Advance and into just independence now, as you say. So we're just in a time of turmoil where we don't know where it's all going to land. And it feels like Italian politics, but without proportional representation.
Yeah, and a hot leader.
Yeah, and not as good food, some would say, but I say Britain has the best food in the world. So, and Maloney, yeah, she's a charismatic leader, but doesn't do anything. She just constantly lets all the immigrants in. Anyway, Speaking of which, we probably have time to be very generous to our free audience and just cover this Macron story to end
Yeah,
on,
why not?
since I promised it. And it could be a little dry, so we'll try and make it exciting. But it's Macron is having a state visit, and he is meeting Starmer, of course, they're bum chums, but he's also meeting Kemi, which you might expect. But he's also meeting Ed Davey, and he's not meeting Nigel Farage. Imagine looking at the British political landscape and thinking, you know who's significant right now? The guy on the water slide, not the guy with all winning all the polls, not that guy who's the revolution in politics in this country. No, the guy pretending to be on a horse. It's that guy. So of course, it's because Macron hates Farage's politics, probably hates him. Farage said he had no idea if they're meeting. Well, they're not. And what this is all about, one, it's a state visit, but it's also about this deal, this bizarre one in, one out deal, where they would take some of our boat people, but we would take their asylum seekers in a one for one deal. So I've not quite understood the point of that. Someone, I'm sure, can explain it to me who's much smarter. But I've not quite seen the point of it, but at least it's like a start. And they've talked about they will intercept people. Previously, that maritime law prevented them from intercepting people at sea, but the French have now said they might actually do that. Oh, thanks, French. I mean, you're dealing with the French. I mean, the French only understand one thing. Let's be honest. In the past, when you talk about Mers el Kabir, you had Churchill attacking French boats, and he killed just under 1,300 French people in the army. I mean, that's what we used to be prepared to do with. If I'm not advocating it, but I'm just saying it was different times.
Just disclaim that.
It was different times, and you could just. But the French only understand one thing. I mean, they're not gonna. They're just going to take the. I mean, Suella Braverman had a piece saying she had to deal with the French on this, and all they ever said was jamais. They just said never. We're never doing this. So get lost. That's what they will do unless you start sinking their ships. But I'm not really advocating. But it's pure comedy.
Still leaving the door open though, Nick. Well, sound of it.
It's a satirical podcast. So Macron have expected to confirm a new maritime protocol where French border police intercept migrant taxi boats at sea for the first time after previously refusing to do so. So that's that part. But then there's this one in, one out thing. Suella Braverman, as you'd expect, has said it's not going to work and it's nonsense. Chris Philp, as you'd expect, has said the same. One of the reasons it might not work is that immediately after saying we're going to do this deal, other EU countries said, hang on a minute, we can't do that. So Italy, Spain, Greece, Malta and Cyprus wrote to the European Commission expressing concern that the one in, one out deal could mean they would face an influx of deported migrants. No one wants migrants, basically. And so France has its own problems and the other countries have their own problems. So even France don't want to do this deal and the other countries don't want to do it either. And Starmer's going around saying, oh, we're going to do this. And he's giving away 12 years of fishing, which was absurd. And so will it be like when he went over to, wasn't it Albania? And he said, oh, yeah, we're going to do return hubs. It's going to be brilliant, return hubs. And then they said, we're not doing return hubs.
No,
and that's just absolutely pathetic. And we've lost the deterrent. Say what you like about the Rwanda scheme, and obviously we had people sabotaging it, including the private jet company and the ECHR and all these things. But that was a deterrent. What's so frustrating is realizing that Australia solved this so quickly once they realized the problem. They had a deterrent sending them to that island of Nauru, is it called? I never know how to pronounce it. But they sent them off to this island. They had 50,000 people arriving a year. They got it down to zero by sending them off to Nauru. Just send them to an island. Then they go, oh yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. So, Dominic Cummings goes further. He says find the leaders and take them out with special forces or capture them. That would be smashing the gangs. But Starmer's going to completely fail to smash the gangs. He's giving away all our fish. Macron's laughing at us. Paul.
I'm always reminded of Will Kingston being on the show, friend of the show.
Yeah.
Top lad. Deceptively handsome. Incredibly big. Big fan. How you doing, Will?
When you say big, you don't mean like fat. Is it, you look?
Yeah, no, I don't mean fat. I mean manly. I don't know what I mean, Nick, but you put me in an awkward position now. Yeah. Hug me, Will. Hug me. Will had already said this isn't. You don't need to figure out the solution to this problem. We've already done it. I've seen him say it tens of times all over the place. There is a solution to this. You're just choosing not to do it. Now, I think perhaps Australia had some geological advantages where, the ocean was a lot vaster than the British Channel. Still, he's absolutely right. The solution is already there. You can stop it tomorrow. You just have to want to. There is not the inclination there from any government existing or historically existing, whilst this problem has been in place, to stop the problem. Smash the Gangs was all about not stopping the boats. It was all about not tackling the problem. It was distracting from the problem and going after the bad guys. Well, they've not really achieved that. We've had a couple of moments where they've broken down doors at dawn and there have been people arrested here and some people deported there, but no gangs have been smashed. The big guys making the big money are still making the big money. And that's never going to change because Keir Starmer does not have anything within his locker or armory that's going to change that. So you just stop the boats. This is an invasion. It's constantly framed as people fleeing war-torn countries, and of course, and I don't want to go over the problem because of course they're not, because they're fleeing France to get here. And then once they lose that argument, which they inevitably do, they talk about how, well, because we're so great and they want to come here and we should be grateful for that and we should open our arms, and why don't we? Well, have you not seen the state of it? It's an absolute mess. We've got our own problems, okay? We cause our own problems. No one says we're not causing our own problems, but we haven't got a chance to fix any of that because we're trying to fix the world's problems because the doors are open. So look,
do you know how to get
simple.
France? Sorry, I was just going to say, you know how you get France to pull their finger out.
I don't think you need to. You sit in the middle of Le Channel, the British Channel, with a great big gun.
But why not just satirical content? Why not just say? Why not have Starmer just say France is so shit, right, that they want to come here at all costs? They're coming over from France, risking their lives because France is that bad. If you just said that every day, some variant of that, don't you think France would eventually act? The UK is so much better than France.
Yeah, I think they probably, the competitive nature of France.
Because of all their smelly cheese, they're coming over here.
Exactly. If we gave it a load of the old bants, some classic bants, we could turn the tide. But look, everyone who shouts on the rooftops that there is a solution to this is right. You just have to be willing to employ it. And that means getting tough. Who is standing up and saying, we need to get tough? There might be some deaths. There might be some deaths in the Channel. Some 30-year-old man who's trying to get over here might end up dying because he's committing a crime. If a burglar climbs a roof to get into a house and falls off the roof and dies on impact, we don't say, oh, that's terrible. That's absolutely terrible. We say, do you know what? He shouldn't have been committing the crime in the first place. We feel for his family, but it's tough titties. Tough titties. Hashtag tough titties needs to be the new rule on this. And we've got to a point, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we? If you tried to break into anywhere, any sovereign piece of land or building or whatever it might be, you would get in some serious trouble nearly anywhere else around the world. In this country, we don't. We don't at all. And it's infuriating. And then you look at the statistics of the crimes they go on to commit that weren't being committed without them here, and you think, why would you do this? It's cultricide.
Yes, I agree. I mean, Ben Habib got in a lot of trouble once for saying a harsh way to deal with them. And you do get people go mad when you say...
You will get in trouble because it's difficult. No one's going to stand behind it politically. But if you get enough people stand behind it, then you wouldn't do it. It's a warlike situation. I don't want to inflate it into something that perhaps would scare people, but you should be scared. There isn't anyone watching or listening to this, maybe on YouTube, that are discovering it for the first time and thinking, "Oh, I heard about this Dixon Cox Go Mental thing. I wonder what these guys are about. They seem really nice and mentally ill." And then they find out that politically we're all aligned to the right and we will shoot him.
Unilaterally declaring war. Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to put a sensitive warning on YouTube now because of this, but hopefully let's see what happens. It's all satirical content, guys. Paul's
having bants, just laughs.
Yeah, Paul's a great guy.
By gun, I mean Spud Gun.
Paul
obviously
wants to welcome in, actually, these migrants. He's said that to me.
Once I finish cuddling Will,
in his house,
I'll cuddle an immigrant.
He's going to turf out his family and turf in a few Afghans. Yeah, I mean, Chris Phillips, as you alluded to, Phillips says, we now know that the nationalities arriving are 24 times more likely to end up in prison than UK citizens. The clear majority of those crossings are single young men, and Afghan males, for example, are 22 times more likely to commit sexual assault. We saw that awful Zoe Gardner, is that her name, on
Yeah.
Newsnight, saying like, they're going to be here. You have to welcome them. And you just think, you're making women more likely to get raped. Are you okay with that as a woman, as a person?
Well, she is okay with it because she doesn't believe that that's the case. So
Or just
she's
thinks it
willing
won't
to take the
happen to her.
risk.
You know,
She
lives
just
in a bubble.
well, she clearly believes it won't happen to her because she lives in one of these parts of London.
So did all
no
those
doubt.
people who travel. So you always hear that story. Couple young girls beheaded in Morocco who went to prove that it was fine, and all that kind of thing. It's like
always, yeah.
ugh, it's
I went pole dancing in Iran. It didn't work out.
yeah. People
Mental.
got to get real. This is why Jess Gill's been very smart and brave to start the Women's Safety Initiative, and that's been getting absolutely hammered on Twitter because they're like, "Oh, it's all white girls." It's like, "Oh, sorry, I didn't know native British people weren't allowed to meet together now without some token, without
It's
getting
mad,
the
isn't it?
diversity right in the room."
That statement actually says it's okay for white women to be raped. What are you worried about?
Yeah,
That's
I
what
know.
all that says. What do you mean it's all white? What's that got to do with anything? They're all potential rape victims, is what I see. You see, it's white women. Don't worry about them. They can be raped.
Well, they think the main issue is why did
Who gives a
8 white women meet each other? That's the issue they see, not rape and harassment.
because they don't believe it exists. They just don't believe it exists. And I don't wish it upon anyone. I'm never going to sit here and say, "Oh, you know, I hope this happens to you." So you see, I really don't hope it happens to you.
Obviously not, but we've ended up the feminist, Paul, saying I've ended up the feminist saying
clearly what we are.
I'm a feminist saying I back the Women's Safety Initiative and it's terrible what's happening to women. And obviously, you know, a racist feminist, but a feminist nonetheless, Paul. The fourth wave.
a well-armed racist
that's
feminist.
The fourth wave.
with a seventh wave of feminism.
Our wave of feminism is women shouldn't vote, but should be safe, and we're all heavily armed to the teeth, as you say.
Preferably white.
Women, that's my kind of feminism. They shouldn't vote. They shouldn't be in Parliament. They shouldn't be MPs, as we saw with Rachel Reeves crying, but they should be safe. And Paul agrees. He was telling me before the show.
Yeah, 100%.
And let's get into that. I probably should have put that behind the paywall, but let's get into that behind the paywall, and we'll run through some of these stories that we missed when we were away, largely my fault. And we'll go into some of that. Yeah, maybe we'll just go into it, because I never got to give my take on Bob Villan or Labour benefits fiasco or the new Corbyn party, although I did do a little video on that. And whatever, the other one I just said, oh yeah, Rachel Reeves. Maybe we'll just go through some fun topics that we've missed in a kind of fun roundup of even worse banter than what we had on here, even sort of more inappropriate. Paul's like declaring war, and we're going to get worse in the paywall.
Yeah.
All right, so go to nickdixon.net for that, if you please. And people are loving it over there, and it's a mere £5. And you can get all sorts of goodies. Go to Paul's at Paul Cox Comedy. He's got a Substack now, and he's on Twitter. He's on the old Tweetbox 8000, the everything app, as Musk wanted to call it. And find me on nickdixon.net, and we'll see you all very soon. Goodbye to the free and YouTube people.